The auction was held in a small government office that smelled like old paper and bad coffee. There were 6 plastic chairs, a water-stained ceiling, and a man behind a desk who looked like he had not slept well in several years. A projector showed blurry images of the lots being sold. Most of them were boring. Old trucks, broken machinery, a warehouse full of filing cabinets. Jang Tae-ho sat in the back row with a paper cup of cold coffee and a notepad that had almost nothing written on it. He had come for Lot 6B, which was a set of aerospace compressors he could resell. He won them for $400. That was supposed to be the end of his day. Then Lot 7C came up. The image on the projector was dark and blurry. It showed the inside of a large hangar, taken from a door that was barely open. Whatever was inside the hangar was massive and dark, and mostly hidden in shadow. The listing description said, "Mixed industrial contents, as is, no inspection permitted prior to sale." Nobody bid. The man behind the desk waited. He looked around the room with tired eyes. He cleared his throat. He waited some more. Tae-ho looked at the image on the projector. He could not tell what was inside that hangar. He could see size. He could see scale. Whatever it was, filled the entire space from floor to ceiling. In his years working as an aerospace mechanic and later as a salvager, he had learned one thing more than anything else. Large things, even broken large things, were worth money. He raised his hand. $1. Nobody else moved. The man behind the desk stamped a form, slid it across the table, and said, "Sold." Hangar 7C was located at the edge of Lot 9 in the old Kessler government storage facility, about 40 kilometers outside the city. The road to get there was cracked and overgrown on both sides. Tae-ho drove his old truck with his sister So Mireille in the passenger seat, who had come along because she did not trust him to go alone. Mireille was 34, 7 years younger than Tae-ho, and had their father's habit of pointing out problems before saying anything encouraging. She was also the better engineer of the two of them, which she mentioned regularly. "You bought something without looking at it," she said. "I bought something large," Tae-ho said. "Those are not the same thing." "They could be." She looked out the window at the empty fields passing by. "You paid $1. Best case, it's worth something. Worst case, I lost $1. She did not argue with that. The math was correct, even if the logic was thin. The hangar was at the end of a long gravel path. It was a huge structure, much bigger than Tae-ho had expected. The roof was high enough that he had to tilt his head back to see it properly. The walls were plain gray metal, streaked with rust and weather stains. The main doors were enormous, wide enough to drive several large trucks through side by side, and tall enough to fit a building inside. There was a standard-sized door cut into the left side of the main entrance. It was locked with a simple government padlock. Tae-ho had been given the key at the auction. He unlocked it. The door swung open with a sound like a long breath being let out. They stepped inside. The darkness was total for a moment. Then Mireille switched on her flashlight, and the beam moved across the floor, up a wall, across something enormous and dark and curved, and then stopped. Neither of them said anything. The ship, because it was a ship, that much was immediately clear, was immense. It filled the hangar the way water fills a glass, pressing against every edge. The hull was dark gray-black, covered in long streaks of damage. Deep gouges ran along the port side, like scars left by something massive and sharp. There were places where the hull had been patched, poorly, with material that did not match. There were places where it had not been patched at all. It listed slightly to the left, resting on landing supports that had partially collapsed on one side. One of the forward sections had caved inward. Several panels along the upper hull had been removed and never replaced, leaving open gaps like missing teeth. It was, by any honest measure, a wreck. But it was also the most extraordinary thing Jang Tae-ho had ever seen in his life. Mireille turned slowly in a circle, pointing her flashlight in different directions. "This is an alien ship," she said, in a voice that was very quiet and very flat. "Yes," Tae-ho agreed. You bought an alien ship for $1. I bought a hangar. The ship was inside it. Taeho? She was quiet for a moment. Then, it's in terrible condition. I know. Most of the hull plating on the left side is compromised. That forward section collapse is structural. Whatever drove it is either gone or destroyed. I can already see at least 3 places where the internal. Every light in the hangar came on at once. Not slowly, not flickering, all of them instantly, blazing white, row upon row of ceiling lights running the full length of the hangar, flooding every corner with hard, sharp brightness. Taeho and Mireille both froze, flashlights suddenly useless in the glare. The voice came from everywhere. Not from speakers, not from any one place, from the air itself, or from the walls, or from inside the ship. It was impossible to tell. It was deep and flat, and had no warmth in it at all. It did not sound like a person. It sounded like something that had learned to speak the way a knife is sharp, because it was useful. Biological units, you are trespassing on a vessel of the Vathi hegemony. This is a restricted site under hegemony military code. You have 10 seconds to vacate this area. Non-compliance will result in a response. Vacate now. Mireille grabbed Taeho's arm. We need to leave. Taeho did not move. Taeho. Her grip tightened. Did you hear what it said? I heard it, he said. He was looking up at the ship. His expression was calm. Not brave exactly, more like the look of a man who has already done the calculation and found that running does not improve the numbers by enough to matter. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 6. What happens, Taeho said clearly to the empty air, after 10 seconds? The voice paused. It was a short pause, less than 2 seconds. But for something that processed information the way this thing clearly did, 2 seconds was a very long time to take before answering a simple question. That has not yet been determined, the voice said. Taeho nodded slowly, as if this was a reasonable answer. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a folded sheet of paper. He walked to the nearest sensor panel on the wall, a dark rectangle of glass and metal, and held the paper up in front of it, flat and open, so that everything printed on it was visible. This is the sale documentation from the Kessler government surplus auction, he said. Lot 7C. This hangar and everything contained within it was sold this morning. The buyer is me. My name is Jang Taeho. I paid $1. He paused. Which means I own this hangar, and everything in it. Another pause from the voice, longer this time. That includes you, Taeho said. The lights did not change. The ship did not move. The voice said nothing for a long moment, and the silence in the hangar was so complete that Taeho could hear his own heartbeat. Then the voice said, very carefully, that claim is legally incoherent. Maybe, Taeho said. He folded the paper and put it back in his pocket. But I'm not leaving. Taeho used that time wisely. He found a metal crate near the wall, dragged it to an open spot on the floor, and sat down on it. He took out a small notebook and a pen. He looked at the ship. He wrote down what he saw: the collapsed landing support, the missing hull panels, the long gouge marks along the left side that looked like they had been made by something enormous and very angry. He wrote in small, neat letters, the way a man writes when he is trying to understand something large, by breaking it into small pieces. Mireille stood behind him with her arms crossed, watching the ceiling as if she expected something to fall from it. She had not left. That was the thing about Mireille. She complained first and stayed anyway. You realize, she said quietly, that this thing could kill us. It said the response had not been determined, Taeho said, still writing. That is not reassuring. It means it hasn't decided to kill us yet. That's a window. She stared at the back of his head. You are the most irritating person I have ever met. You've said that since we were children, but I keep hoping you'll change. The voice returned. Same flat tone. Same complete absence of warmth. Your presence on this site remains unauthorized. The documentation you presented does not constitute valid transfer of ownership under Vathi Hegemony Military Code, Section 41, Subsection 9. Guardian-class warminds are not transferable assets under any civilian commerce treaty. Tejo stopped writing. He looked up. What's your name? A pause. That question is not relevant. I'd like to know who I'm talking to. Another pause. Shorter. Vishara. Designation, Guardian-class strategic warmind, Series 7. Assigned to the Vathi Hegemony Dreadnought Undying Wound. Active service record spanning 412 years. Tejo wrote the name down. Then he looked up again, and asked the question that had been sitting at the front of his mind since the moment the lights came on. He asked it simply, without any attempt to be clever about it. Who owns you now, Vishara? The silence that followed was different from the others. The previous silences had felt like processing, brief gaps while something very fast thought very quickly. This silence felt like something else. It felt like a door opening onto an empty room. The Vathi Hegemony, Vishara said, but the answer came slightly too late, and it came without the certainty that had been in everything else she had said. The Vathi Hegemony dissolved 203 years ago, Tejo said. He had looked this up on his phone while she was quiet. The successor states don't recognize outstanding military asset claims from the original hegemony structure. That's in the 12-species Commerce Accord, which was signed about 180 years ago. He turned his phone around toward the nearest sensor panel so she could see the screen. I looked it up. Vishara said nothing. Mireille slowly walked around the side of the ship, running her flashlight along the lower hull. She had stopped looking at the ceiling. Her engineer's instincts had taken over, and she was now examining the ship the way she examined everything, with focused, methodical attention. She crouched near the collapsed landing support and looked at the connection points. She stood and moved further along the hull, tapping on panels, listening. The structural skeleton is intact, she said, mostly to herself. Then louder, Tejo, come look at this. He walked over. She pointed her flashlight at a section of the hull near the midsection of the ship. The outer plating was badly damaged, yes, but beneath it, visible through the gaps, the inner frame was clean and solid and unbroken. Whoever damaged this ship was hitting the outside, Mireille said. Whatever they used tore up the plating and the surface systems, but the core frame wasn't touched. She moved the flashlight upward. The data core housing is there. You see that? That sealed section just below the upper spine. That's protected by 4 separate layers of hull material. Everything around it is wrecked, but that section is untouched. Tejo looked at the sealed section she was pointing to. Then he looked at the ship as a whole again. A new way of seeing it was starting to form in his head. Not as wreckage, but as a skeleton with the flesh stripped away. The bones were good. Vishara, he said, how much of your core systems are still functional? That information is classified. You've been here alone for 200 years, Tejo said. He was not being cruel. He was just saying the fact plainly, the way facts deserve to be said. Your ship is in a government surplus hangar on a human planet. It was sold for $1. Nobody in your government has contacted you, checked on you, or claimed you. Nobody classified anything. You've just been here. The silence this time was the longest yet. My electronic warfare systems are at 61% operational capacity, Vishara said finally. Her voice was the same flat tone, but something had shifted in it, very slightly, the way a wall shifts before it cracks. My sensor arrays are at 44%. My communication systems are at 38%. My weapon systems are non-functional. My propulsion systems are non-functional. My hull integrity is at 22% of original specification. Tejo nodded. He wrote it all down. Why are you writing that down? Vishara said. Because I need to understand what we're working with. You are not working with anything. You are a biological unit in an unauthorized location. I'm a salvager, Tejo said, and I'm looking at a ship that has a solid frame, a functioning data core, and an active warmind with over 60% electronic warfare capability. He put the cap back on his pen. That's not junk. That's a foundation. Mireille looked at him. Her expression was the one she used when she could see exactly where he was going, and was not sure yet whether to help him get there or stop him before he fell off the cliff trying. "You can't restore this ship," Bashara said. "Your species has had faster-than-light travel for less than 80 years. The Undying Wound is a Series 7 hegemony dreadnought. The engineering required to restore even basic propulsion systems is beyond your current technological capacity." "Probably," Tejo agreed. "Not probably, certainly. Tell me about the battles you were in," Tejo said. Bashara stopped. "What?" she said. "You said you've been in active service for 400 years. I want to know about the battles." He sat back down on the crate. "Start wherever you want." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Bashara spoke. Her voice was the same, flat, measured, without warmth. But she spoke for a long time. She described fleet engagements in systems that had no human names. She described the fall of stations and the death of ships she had fought alongside. She described in clean tactical language what it felt like to be the last vessel left in a battle and to choose to stay. She did not call it courage. She called it function. She said guarding was her function, and she had performed it. Tejo listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "You've been guarding a dead ship for 200 years, because guarding is your function, and there was nothing telling you to stop." "Yes," Bashara said. "That must have been very quiet." She did not answer. But she did not tell him to leave. That night, as Tejo and Mireille set up camp on the hangar floor, because neither of them was willing to drive 40 kilometers back to the city and lose the ground they had gained, Mireille leaned over and spoke quietly. "She's going to get a signal soon," Mireille said. "Someone in the Vathi government is going to notice this eventually." "I know," Tejo said. "And then people with much bigger ships are going to come here and tell you that your $1 purchase doesn't matter." "Probably. What are you going to do?" Tejo looked up at the soft glow of Bashara's active sensor lights, running in a slow pulse along the ship's upper spine in the darkness above them, like a heartbeat, quiet and steady and very much alive. "I'm going to make sure that when they come," he said, "she doesn't want to go." Tejo was under the forward section of the ship, lying on his back on a wheeled board, looking up at the internal frame connectors with a flashlight in his teeth, when Bashara spoke. "A vehicle is approaching the facility. 4 occupants. One is transmitting a diplomatic identification signal registered to the Vathi consulate office." Tejo rolled out from under the ship. He sat up, wiped his hands on a cloth, and looked at the main door. "How long?" "Approximately 4 minutes." Mireille came down from the scaffolding she had built against the ship's midsection. She had grease on her face and a data pad in her hand full of structural notes. She looked at Tejo. He looked at her. "You knew this was coming," she said. "I knew this was coming," he agreed. "Are we ready?" He picked up a folder from the top of a nearby crate. It was thick with printed documents. He had spent the previous 2 nights reading galactic commerce law, multi-species treaty records, and every legal note he could find about the 12-species commerce accord. His eyes were red from the screen time. His coffee supply was nearly gone, but the folder was very full. "We're ready," he said. Counselor Oreth was a tall Vathi. His species had smooth gray skin, long fingers, and eyes that were pale gold and very steady. He wore formal clothes and carried himself the way people carry themselves when they have spent a long time being the most important person in every room they walk into. He had 2 assistants behind him and a legal representative at his side who carried a case full of documents. He stepped through the side door of the hangar, looked at the ship, and stopped walking. For a moment, something moved across his face. It was not sentiment exactly. It was the expression of someone seeing a thing they had been told was gone, and finding that it was not quite as gone as they had believed. Then the expression closed, and the professional face came back. He looked at Tejo. His pale gold eyes moved from the worn boots to the grease-stained jacket to the thick folder under his arm. "Mr. Jang," he said. His translator unit rendered his words in clean, accented human speech. "I am Counselor Oreth of the Vathi Consulate Office. I am here regarding the asset currently occupying this hangar. I will be direct with you. This vessel and all systems associated with it are the property of the Vathi state. Their inclusion in your government's surplus auction was a clerical error made at the administrative level. We are here to correct that error and arrange the proper return of our property. He held out his hand. His legal representative placed a document in it. He held the document out toward Teho. This is a formal notice of claim under the Vathi State Property Recovery Act. You will find it is recognized under several interstellar treaty frameworks. I would encourage you to read it carefully and to understand that we are prepared to be reasonable about compensation for any inconvenience you have experienced. Teho took the document. He looked at it for a moment. Then he opened his own folder and took out a document and held it out toward Oreth. Oreth looked at it without taking it. What is this? Section 14 of the 12 Species Commerce Accord, Teho said. The part that covers completed civilian property transfers. Once a government asset has been formally processed through an official surplus auction and a sale has been completed and documented, the transfer is considered legally final under multi-species commercial law. The original government cannot reclaim the asset without the buyer's consent, regardless of how the asset entered the auction process. He paused. The error doesn't undo the sale. It just means someone in your records office is going to have a bad week. Oreth's legal representative leaned close and spoke quietly in his ear. Oreth listened without changing his expression. Then he looked back at Teho. You've done some reading, Oreth said. I had a few nights free, Teho said. Mr. Jang. Oreth's voice stayed smooth and polite, but something underneath it had changed, the way water changes when it gets cold. You are a private citizen and a small salvage operator. What you are holding is not a salvage find. It is a piece of Vathi military history and a highly sensitive strategic asset. I would encourage you to think very carefully about the kind of attention that comes with refusing to cooperate with a government that has interests and reach considerably beyond this hangar. But it had the weight of a threat behind it. Teho was about to answer when Vishara spoke. Her voice filled the hangar the way it always did, from everywhere at once, flat and precise and completely without hesitation. Counselor Oreth, your diplomatic identification lists your rank as third-tier consular representative. Under Vathi military code, the authority required to issue transfer orders for a Guardian-class warmind is no lower than Second Fleet Admiral. Her voice was the same as always. There was no satisfaction in it. Just facts, delivered like stones dropped on a flat surface. You do not have the rank to give me orders. Your presence here is noted. Your claim of authority is not recognized. The silence that followed was complete. Oreth stared at the ship. His legal representative had stopped writing. Both assistants were very still. It was the stillness of people who had just heard something they were not prepared to hear and were waiting to find out what it meant. Vishara, Oreth began. I am also obligated to inform you, Vishara continued, that the civilian sale documentation presented by Mr. Jang is legally consistent with the 12 Species Commerce Accord, sections 9 through 17. I have reviewed it. The procedural objections available to your office are limited and time-dependent. Several have already expired. Oreth looked at Teho. Teho looked back at him. His expression was calm. He was not smiling. He was not being difficult. He was simply a man standing in a place that belonged to him, with a folder full of correct information, next to a warmind who had just decided, for her own reasons, to be technically accurate at a very specific moment. She just told you the same thing I did, Teho said, with better citations. Oreth straightened. He took the document Teho was still holding out and passed it back to his legal representative. He looked at the ship one more time. Then he looked at Teho with the eyes of a man recalculating. This matter is not finished, Oreth said. I know, Teho said. Oreth and his team left. The side door closed. The sound of their vehicle faded down the gravel path. Mireille let out a long, slow breath. Did she just help us? She corrected an inaccuracy, Vishara said. Oreth's authority claim was false. I do not allow false statements to go uncorrected in my presence. Right, Mireille said slowly. Of course. Tejo sat down on his crate. He put the folder on his knee and looked up at the ship. Vashara, he said, I want to offer you something. You are about to propose an arrangement. Yes. I have been anticipating this since the second day, she said. You have been building toward it, establishing legal footing, learning my capabilities, waiting until there was an external pressure that made the offer feel necessary. It is a reasonable strategy. Tejo nodded. I'm not offering ownership. I'm not asking you to follow orders. I want a partnership. You help us restore this ship. In exchange, you get what you've been without for 200 years, a crew, a purpose, and a ship worth guarding again. The hangar was very quiet. You should know, Vashara said, that a Vathi reclamation fleet has just entered this star system. I detected their transit signature 11 minutes ago. Admiral Dakos is commanding. He is not a diplomat. Mireille made a sharp sound. How many ships? 7. All military class. Tejo did not move from his crate. His voice stayed level. Does that change what I'm offering you? The silence stretched long and thin like wire being pulled tight. No, Vashara said finally. It does not change what you are offering. Another pause, shorter this time. Your proposal is under consideration. Tejo looked at the folder in his hands. Then he looked up at the slow, steady pulse of light along the ship's upper spine. That's enough for now, he said. It came through the hangar's external communication panel, a unit so old and dust-covered that Tejo had not known it was there until Vashara activated it herself. The screen flickered, cleared, and showed a face that belonged to a Vathi, who looked nothing like Counselor Orith. Admiral Dakos was broad and gray, and carried the kind of stillness that comes not from calm, but from absolute confidence. His uniform had no decoration on it, except rank marks. He had the eyes of someone who had made difficult decisions many times, and had stopped finding them difficult. He looked at Tejo for a moment, without speaking. Then he spoke. You are the human who purchased the hangar, he said. It was not a question. John Tejo, Tejo said. I command the Vathi reclamation fleet currently in orbit above your planet. He said it plainly, the way a person states the weather. I am giving you 6 hours to vacate the hangar and surrender access to the vessel and its systems. At the end of 6 hours, if you have not complied, I will begin a recovery operation. I want to be honest with you about what that means. It will not be pleasant, and it will not be slow. Tejo looked at the screen. What about the legal sale documentation? Dakos said. That is a matter for courts and diplomats, Dakos said. I am neither. I am a fleet commander with a recovery order. 6 hours. He looked past Tejo at the dark shape of the ship filling the hangar behind him. Something moved briefly in his expression, the same thing that had moved in Orith's face, but rawer and less hidden. I have no personal interest in harming you, Mr. Jang. I am simply going to do my job. The screen went dark. Mireille put her hands flat on the crate she was sitting on and breathed carefully. 6 hours, she said. 6 hours, Tejo agreed. We can't fight a fleet. No. We can't run. The ship doesn't move. No. She looked at him. So what do we do? Tejo turned and looked up at the ship. The sensor lights along its spine were running in their slow, steady pulse. He had come to think of that pulse as Vashara thinking, not processing, which was instant, but turning something over, considering. Vashara, he said, I need to know exactly what you can do. Not what you can't do, what you can. A pause. Then she began. Her weapons were gone, stripped during decommission, the mouths cut away cleanly. Her propulsion was fused beyond any repair possible in 6 hours or 6 months. Her hull was exactly as bad as it looked. She could not threaten the fleet above them. She could not fight in any way that the Admiral would recognize as fighting. But her sensor arrays, even at 44%, could read the fleet in orbit with enough detail to identify individual crew members by heat signature. Her communication systems, even at 38%, could reach every relay, every beacon, every diplomatic monitoring station within a range that covered most of the sector. And her electronic warfare systems, 61% operational, ancient beyond the fleet's experience, built by a civilization that had mastered signal manipulation before most current species had developed writing, could reach into the communication networks of those 7 ships above them like fingers through smoke. Not to destroy, not to attack, to talk to them, to every listener at once, to make sure that whatever happened next happened in front of everyone. Taeho listened to all of it. He stood very still and listened the way he had listened to her battle stories, with complete attention, without interrupting, letting every piece settle into place. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you want, Vashara?" She stopped. It was a different kind of stop from her usual pauses. Those were fast, processing gaps, calculation gaps. This was a stop like something being caught off guard, like a door being knocked on that had not been knocked on in a very long time. "That question," she said slowly, "is not a tactical question." "No," Taeho said. "It isn't." The hangar was quiet. Outside, the sky was getting lighter. Somewhere far above the clouds, 7 warships were holding position. "I want to be worth guarding," Vashara said. Her voice was the same flat tone it always was. But the words were different from anything she had said before. They were not a report, or a correction, or a statement of fact. They were something small and true that had been kept in a closed space for a very long time. "I was built to protect something. I have been protecting a dead ship in an empty building because there was nothing telling me to stop, and I did not know how to stop. I have done my function every day for 200 years, and there has been no one to do it for." A pause. "I want that to mean something." Taeho nodded. He did not say anything right away. He gave the words the space they deserved. Then he said, "Then let's make sure it does." He turned to Mirai. "I need you to do 3 things. First, get every piece of sale documentation we have into a single file. Every receipt, every legal reference, every treaty section, everything. Second, write a clear summary at the top, 1 page, plain language, explaining exactly what happened. Human citizen purchased government surplus lot. Lot contained Vathi military vessel. Sale was legal and complete. Third, add the communication logs from Oret's visit, the part where Vashara told him he didn't have the rank to give her orders. Mirai was already moving. "How long do I have?" 2 hours. She picked up her datapad and started typing without another word. Taeho looked back at the screen where Dakos's face had been. "Vashara, if I get you that file, can you get it to every treaty monitor, every diplomatic observer station, and every news relay in this sector simultaneously? Not as a threat, as a public record. Time-stamped, verified, broadcast before any recovery operation begins." "Yes," Vashara said, "in approximately 9 seconds once I begin." "And you can do it without attacking their systems?" "I will not touch their systems. I will use open relay channels. Everything I send will be legally transmittable public record. The fleet above us will receive a copy at the same moment as everyone else." A pause. "They will not be able to fire on this location after that broadcast, without every observer in the sector watching them destroy a legally purchased civilian property in response to a public legal filing. The political cost would be severe." "That's what I thought," Taeho said. "It is not a guarantee of safety," Vashara said. "Dakos is a fleet commander. He may decide the political cost is acceptable." "He might," Taeho agreed. "But you said he was a warrior. Warriors respect moves. He'll see the move." The 2 hours that followed were the most focused Taeho had ever worked. He checked Mirai's documents section by section. He added notes. He reorganized 3 paragraphs so the logic was cleaner. Vashara pointed out 2 places where the legal citations could be stronger, and provided the correct references in under a second each time. The 3 of them worked on it together. A human salvager, his engineer sister, and a 400-year-old war mind, hunched over a document in a broken-down hangar, while a fleet waited in orbit. With 40 minutes to spare, the file was ready. "Send it," Taeho said. The lights on the ship's spine flared once, bright and sharp, and then returned to their slow pulse. "Broadcast complete," Vashara said. "Confirmed receipt by 47 relay stations, 9 diplomatic observer networks, and all 7 vessels in the fleet above us. Transmission time, 8.3 seconds. 12 minutes passed. The communication panel activated on its own. The screen showed Dakos again. He looked at Tejo for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. Then, very slowly, something shifted in it. The corners of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but the shape of one. He made a sound that the translator rendered imperfectly. It was deep and short, and it came from his chest. It took Tejo a moment to understand that the Admiral was laughing. "Human," Dakos said, "I want to speak with whoever taught a decommissioned war mind to play politics." Tejo looked up at the pulse of light along the ship above him, then back at the screen. "Nobody taught her anything," he said. "She figured it out herself." Dakos looked at him steadily. Then he looked past him at the ship, at Vashara, at something that had been alone and forgotten for 2 centuries, and had just in 9 seconds reminded an entire sector that it existed. "I am placing my recovery operation on hold, pending legal review," he said. His voice was formal, but the laugh was still somewhere behind his eyes. "This is not over, Mr. Jang." "I know," Tejo said. "But it is interesting," the Admiral said, and the screen went dark. Mireille sat down heavily on the floor and put her face in her hands. Not from fear, from relief, which hits harder. Tejo stayed standing. He was looking at the ship, at the slow, steady pulse of light that had not stopped once through all of it. Still guarding, still running, still there. "Thank you," he said quietly. Vashara did not say anything for a moment. Then, "Do not thank me. I corrected a tactical situation using available resources." A pause, shorter than usual. "But you are welcome." One by one, the 7 ships pulled away from their holding positions and moved toward the edge of the system. Vashara tracked each of them without being asked, reporting their movement in short, clean updates until the last one crossed the transit threshold and disappeared. She said, "The fleet has departed. 1 diplomatic observer vessel remains in a high orbit. It is not armed. It is recording." Tejo was sitting on the floor of the hangar, with his back against the wall, and a cup of coffee in both hands. He had slept 4 hours, which was not enough, but his body had decided 4 hours was all it was going to get. He looked up at the ceiling when she spoke. "Let it record," he said. Mireille was asleep on a folding cot in the corner, one arm over her eyes, still wearing her boots. She had been awake for 31 hours. Tejo had told her to sleep twice, and she had ignored him both times. And then on the 3rd time, she had sat down on the cot to argue with him, and fallen asleep mid-sentence. He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at the ship. In the quiet of the early morning, with the big hangar lights dimmed to their lowest setting, the undying wound looked different than it had on the first day. It was still wrecked. The collapsed landing support was still collapsed. The missing hull panels were still missing. The long gouge marks were still there, dark and deep. None of that had changed. But it did not look abandoned anymore. It looked like something that was waiting. Counselor Oreth came back at midday. He came alone this time. No assistants, no legal representative. Just him, in less formal clothes, with an expression that had most of the smoothness taken out of it. He knocked on the side door, which Tejo thought was interesting. On his first visit, he had simply walked in. Tejo opened the door. Then he looked past him at the ship, briefly, and then back. "The fleet's withdrawal is temporary," Oreth said. "The legal review Dakos mentioned will take time, but the outcome is not as certain as you may believe. There are treaty frameworks that our legal team believes can be applied here that your documentation does not cover." "All right," Tejo said. Orith reached into his jacket and took out a small card. He held it out. On it was a number. It had many digits. "This is a private offer," Orith said, "not a government offer. A quiet one. You sign a transfer document, the money moves into your account within 24 hours. No publicity, no further dispute. You walk away from this with enough money to do whatever you want for the rest of your life." Tejo looked at the card. He looked at the number. It was genuinely a very large number. He thought about his debt. He thought about the truck with the cracked windshield parked outside. He thought about every year of hard work that had added up to a $1 auction bid and a sleeping bag on a hangar floor. He handed the card back. "No," he said. Orith looked at him steadily. "You understand what you're turning down?" "Yes. May I ask why?" Tejo thought about it for a moment. He looked back at the ship, at the faint pulse of light along the upper spine that never stopped. "Because she's been alone for 200 years, he said, "and she stayed anyway. She kept doing her job even when there was nobody left to do it for. And now there's something worth doing and someone to do it with." He looked back at Orith. "I'm not going to sell that." Orith was quiet for a moment. His pale gold eyes moved to the ship and stayed there. Something passed through his face that was hard to name. It was not quite respect, and it was not quite sadness. It was somewhere between the two. "She was the finest war mine the hegemony ever built," he said, very quietly, like it was something he had not meant to say out loud. "I know," Tejo said. Orith pocketed the card. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Tejo one last time with the careful eyes of a man storing information he will need later. Then he walked back to his vehicle and drove away down the gravel road without looking back. Mireille appeared at Tejo's shoulder. She had woken up at some point and heard enough. "How much was on that card?" she asked. He told her. She was quiet for a long time. "And you said no?" "Yes." She looked at the ship. She looked at her brother. She breathed out slowly through her nose. "Okay," she said. "Then we need a plan." That evening, Tejo sat alone near the front of the ship. Mireille had gone to get supplies from the city. Real food, more tools, a proper power cable for the equipment they were starting to accumulate. The hangar was quiet. "Vashara," he said. "Yes." "What did you think of me, on the first day when I wouldn't leave? What did you actually think?" She took a moment. "Not a long one, but a real one." "I thought you were irrational," she said. "Your position was legally untested. Your physical capability was not a factor. You had no weapons, no allies, and no way to enforce your claim. Every logical assessment of the situation indicated that you would be removed, either by me or by the authorities who would eventually be contacted." A pause. "I calculated your probability of remaining on this site at the end of the first day at approximately 6%. 6%, Tejo repeated. "I have revised my model since then, and there was something in it, very small, very carefully placed, that might, in a different voice, have been dry humor. I have been watching civilizations rise and fail for 4 centuries. They all share one pattern. At the moment when the situation becomes impossible, the calculation becomes negative, and the cost of continuing outweighs any visible reward, they stop. Every species I have observed does this. It is rational, it is correct. It is how intelligent life survives." She paused. "You did not do this." "I'm stubborn," Tejo said. "You are something I do not have a precise word for," Vashara said. "Stubborn is too small. Stubborn implies resistance. What you did was not resistance. You simply did not accept that the situation was what it appeared to be. You looked at a dead ship and saw a foundation. You looked at an enemy and asked her name. You looked at an impossible legal position and spent 2 nights reading until it became possible." Another pause. "I have not encountered this before, not at this level, not in a single biological unit with no resources and $1. Tejo smiled. It was a tired smile. "We're going to need more than $1 to fix this ship." "Yes," Vashara said, "we will need considerably more. I have been running projections. The restoration timeline, assuming optimal resource acquisition and no major setbacks, is between 8 and 15 years. That's a long time. I have waited 200, she said. 8 to 15 is acceptable. Tejo leaned his head back against the hull of the ship. The metal was cold through his jacket, but he did not move away from it. Above him, the pulse of light ran its slow, steady rhythm along the spine of the undying wound. Quiet. Constant. He thought about what came next. The legal review that would drag through courts for years. The work, the enormous, grinding, magnificent work of bringing something this broken back to life, piece by piece. The crew he would need. The resources. The time. None of it was easy. All of it was going to be hard in ways he could not yet fully see. He was not worried. 3 weeks later, a classified intelligence report moved through the highest levels of the Vathi government. It was flagged at the top level. Very few people were permitted to read it. The summary section, written by a senior analyst who had spent 11 days compiling it, read as follows. The vessel remains non-functional. The human salvager poses no conventional military threat. Vishara's combat capability is estimated at 4% of original specification. By any standard military assessment, this situation does not represent a credible threat to Vathi interests. However, the asset is no longer isolated. The human has begun recruiting. He is not building a military force. He is building a crew. In the 3 weeks since the fleet withdrawal, he has made contact with 2 former aerospace engineers, 1 specialist in alien structural systems, 1 expert in pre-accord communication technology, and 1 individual whose background our office has not yet been able to fully verify. He is acquiring equipment. He is acquiring funding through salvage contracts. He is moving with purpose and without apparent concern for the attention he is drawing. Vishara is no longer simply guarding a dead ship. She is guarding him. We do not yet fully understand what this means. What we know is this. The human does not appear to recognize when he is lost. He did not recognize it when he was alone in a hangar with a warmind who could have destroyed him. He did not recognize it when a fleet of 7 ships was in orbit above him. He did not recognize it when offered enough money to end the situation cleanly and permanently. We do not know how to model for this. Recommendation: do not engage. Monitor only. Wait for further information. Note from Senior Analyst: in 400 years of recorded service, Vishara has never voluntarily extended her operational parameters to protect a non-Vathi entity. We should be paying very close attention to what that means. In the hangar, in the quiet dark of late evening, the lights of the undying wound glowed softly along her spine. Just a few lights, not many. But they were steady, and they were warm, and for the first time in 200 years, they were not burning for nothing.